Number 9, discussion of FY 2016-2017 Florida Recreation Development Assistance Program FERDAP funding cycle. Sheila, you have.
Seems like I was just up here talking about FERDAP. It was, because I was. Last October was the last cycle, and we applied for 2 projects, one for Benny Russell for playground and tennis improvements, and that was a large category application, and then we applied for a Navarre Park small $50,000 project. And when the legislature decided how much funding would be applied to the program, they allocated a small amount of money and decided to put those funds towards the small projects only. So in this last cycle that we applied for, it does appear that the Navarre Park project will be funded, but unfortunately the Benny Russell Park would not. Because the legislative session is going to be earlier next year, it is going to push a lot of our grant application deadlines up a few months. So FERDAP rolled up on us, and it's going to be due next month. So it's important that we go ahead and get feedback from you all as far as which potential project you would like us to work on. Typically in a cycle, we can apply for 2 parks. But because we have an open land and water for the Baghdad Mill side, and because we recently got the Navarre Park, that takes up 2 of our allowed 3, so we can apply for 1 in this upcoming cycle. Looking back at the options from last year, we did apply for our top 2 scoring projects. The third most competitive project at that time would have been renovations to Florida Town. My recommendation, unless you have any other suggestions, would be to pursue a small category, a $50,000 or less application. That seems to be the trend for the last 3 years. And until the funding allocations pick back up some more, I don't believe they'll be funding the large category. I do still believe Florida Town would be a competitive application. I'm not sure how far 50,000 would go, but we can certainly work to strategize and identify those items that's desired, but also scores the highest. So unless you have any other park projects you would like us to consider, that would be my recommendation.
Commissioner Cole.
To the chair, Sheila, I'd certainly support Florida Town. I think we've not put a lot of money into that particular park over the last few years, and it's certainly an important part of our county and historic part of our county. So even though it's not my district, I'd certainly support that move. I would like to take another look at McAllister Park, though. It was a recipient of a FERDAP grant in the past, but we still have some needs out there that would meet the smaller amounts. So
I will certainly continue to.
Fidelis too. I think back in the day, Commissioner Salter and I partnered on Fidelis, but those are a couple of parks that come to mind, McAllister and Fidelis, that would qualify, I think, and suit well for the smaller amounts.
Sure, we'll certainly keep that on our list. I did do some level of evaluation on that one last year, and it did not appear to score very well, but we can certainly continue to look at that. And it would be helpful to know which specific needs are in that park moving forward, and perhaps we can look at other opportunities as well.
I'll get with you on McAllister.
Okay.
Commissioner Jerry Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheila, for clarification, the Navarre Park received the $50,000 this year. Would they still be eligible next year for the same grant using the same criteria, and will they meet all the points that they met last year, or will some of the $50,000 that's awarded to this grant be used towards taking off some of these points where it's going to score lower, just for clarification?
We did look at that, and we certainly could do almost a phased approach to Navarre Park, put in a phase 2 application. However, because we did sort of pick all the low-hanging fruit last year and all of those items that would score competitively, I just don't think, if it is a $50,000 grant, that we could do much more and still have multiple amenities that are being scored, if that makes sense.
It does. And then, I mean, certainly 2 of the parks in my district scored 2 out of the top 3. I don't think that both of the applications need to go to one district. So I certainly would support one of them going to another district, and one of them I would like for it to be in my district. I personally, the Benny Russell Park and playground and picnic area, there's some plans I have to do that without grant money. I've kind of been waiting on this grant because there were some commitments from the previous commissioner on the tennis out there, and I know that ties up another commissioner of some money that he had committed to that project. This to me was kind of the last hurrah for me to try to get the tennis there. Even with the grant, it was not going to pay for half of what it's going to cost to do tennis. I'm going to have to sit back and reevaluate that situation there, but maybe put that on hold because there's other parks that I need to be spending money on, and $250,000 of money committed to a project several years ago, I don't know that I can go along with it, especially if it's only going to pay for half of that project. The tennis is like a $1.4 million project. With all this money from District 3, from mine, and the grant, it was only going to be, I guess, $700,000 plus a little bit of money that they were going to raise, $750,000 to a $1.4 million project for tennis, and that doesn't even include the ADA park and the other things that we have to do to be able to score high, because it says the playground and the picnicking and some of the trails and everything. So I'll get with you about reevaluating Benny Russell. Florida Town needs improvements, like Commissioner Cole said. It's a park that has a lot of potential, and it hasn't had much effort, or money spent on it in the last few years. So I would like to look at that park and see about what $50,000 would do, because I think we have a better chance at getting a grant at $50,000 than we do $200,000. So I'll meet with you and Commissioner Salter. I'll have to look back at the tennis. I know that that's in my district, but it's something that you had committed to. It may be time for us to move on from thinking that we're going to have a $1.4 million tennis complex in Pace. I don't think that it's the time, and it's not something that I've supported. But since there was a previous commitment, I tried to do everything I could to try to get to those funds. But I'll get back with the tennis people as well. I don't know that I'll mess with anything on that footprint. That way, if anything in the future, years down the road happens where we could have tennis, since there's a plan in place. But I'm ready to start spending some money on things that I think are important to District 1, and that my committee as well has come up with some things that they feel are important. So I'll get with you, Sheila. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the time.
Thank you, and I'll follow your lead on whatever you want to do with the tennis complex. Commissioner Rob Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Sheila, for the work on the grants. Good news about Navarre. The Commissioner J.R. Williamson was good enough to allow the Navarre Park project to be submitted this time, so I am obviously in 100% support of the Florida Town submittal for his district. It's definitely needed. I echo some of his same concerns for the Navarre Park project. It was kind of a surprise to me when we started evaluating all of the requirements and all of the improvements that are needed at Navarre Park. We got to $500,000 pretty quick. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure, as you say, how far $50,000 will go. But I've started looking at how we could do a phased-in approach there. But I think it's something we should definitely include in our legislative update for talking to our lobbyists and get their recommendation on where we should be looking for these funds to improve some of the parks. And I'll get together with you on the $50,000. When is the deadline for when we would have to move forward with whatever was included in that grant? I know that it specifically laid out what it was supposed to be used for.
For the Navarre Park Award?
Yes.
What'll happen is we'll get an official notification letter sometime in the near future, and then that will be followed by a grant agreement, which should outline what we asked for in the grant. And so grant agreements always come back to the board for approval. So at that time, we can certainly look at the options, and there is a small amount of flexibility towards what you can do with the money, as long as you are not jeopardizing the score of your project. Sometimes if you want to spend a little bit more on this and less on that, that's certainly an option we can look at with approval of the grantor. Is that sort of your question about moving forward with that project?
There's the main concern there now is the aging playground equipment and then the splash pad. Right now we're paying for a contractor monthly to maintain the splash pad, and in talking with our tourism folks and Parks and Rec, that may have started out as a community amenity. It is now certainly a tourism amenity where folks that are visiting here, that's where they bring their families. So, yeah, I'd love to see what we can do with that 50,000 and incorporate that and have a plan in place for how we would do phased-in improvements to that park and kind of follow Commissioner Williamson's lead on being prudent with how we're going to allocate the limited funds that we have.
There's typically a 3-year time to spend the money, if that helps you out.
So
but
we've got time.
Yes, and certainly we'll talk more about it.
Cool. But we'll take that money. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sheila, so the action you need today is for the board to approve the Florida Town Park as our project?
Typically, as long as you're good with that, you could just recommend development of the application, and then I will bring it back. It may be as early as the next meeting where I give you all a breakdown of where the money will go and just get your formal approval. If you're comfortable formally approving it today for $50,000 with no match, that's fine with me. We do have to do a series of public meetings, if you'll recall. One will be with the Parks and Rec Committee. One will be a specially advertised meeting that we go over that, and then there'll also be a community meeting. So there's plenty of opportunity for public input on exactly how the $50,000 will be spent. But if you're comfortable with just approving the submittal today, that's fine with me, or you can just wait till the next meeting.
After the last couple of weeks, I'm getting leery when the board doesn't take any official action. So Commissioner J. Williamson, would you
Thank you,
like to
Mr. Chairman.
make a
Sheila,
motion?
if we do not officially approve the Florida Town application today and we wait until the next meeting, is that going to put you in a bind as far as time goes, or is there work that we can be doing talking about the Florida Town Park and some of the things that my committee would like to see out there, some of the things I would like to see out there, and then come to the board at the next meeting and approve it? Is that going to put you in a time bind? Because you have to have this done by August the 14th.
Yeah, I just can't wait 2 weeks for you to tell me to work on another project. But if the direction is for me to pursue working on that application, we can start doing the legwork and the preliminary work.
But say that I don't know if I want to do 50 or 200 yet at Florida Town, but that would be decisions that I have to look at what scope of work there is. We can decide that and approve that at the next meeting. We can be
Yes.
working on the Florida Town
Yeah.
project. Just the specifics of it can come back to the board at the next meeting for approval.
That's correct. I just don't have enough time to switch gears 2
Okay.
weeks down the road.
Mr. Chairman, I can commit to working with Sheila at Florida Town and coming up with some type project out there, but I cannot commit today on all the specifics to it, so I'd like to wait till the next meeting if that's okay with the board.
What we'll do is we'll table this.
We've gotten your direction.
Okay.
If the agreement is for the submission of the Florida Town Park for the FERDAP cycle, whatever form that takes, whether that's a large project, small project, we will bring the project back to you probably either at the next meeting or the 13th meeting, since she does have to meet with some groups, and including the District 1 recreation group would be a good thing to do, so.
No action today. All right,
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Cole.
While we're on the subject of parks, and we talked some with Commissioner Rob Williamson about his district down there, there's been a lot of news lately about the overpass, the pedestrian crossover down there. And I'd like to maybe get that on the next agenda for further discussion, because, I feel like the board and especially our Public Works Department and the citizens should have full disclosure and time to talk about that. Because if it's built, then it becomes an entity of Santa Rosa County. It becomes a Public Works maintenance item. I've never been convinced that an individual crossover on 98 is the way to go with moving people safely across 98. And we haven't heard yet anything about price of property. We know on one side, of course, we own the park and can land there, but what's the cost going to be on the other side? So I'd like to see that eventually get on an agenda where we can discuss it a little further before it gets too far down the road.
Commissioner Rob Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it is Highway 98, Commissioner Cole, and that's a pretty important major arterial roadway for Santa Rosa County commerce and tourism. I've been in talks with our county engineer and public works and county administrator and the design team, and we have recently had the DOT hosted their meeting, which they did not, they don't allow any questions, but it was more of an informational meeting. And yes, it was my intention that at the next set of meetings, we would have that on the agenda and that we could kind of provide a status update, because we are at the 60% design phase. And now the board does have a decision to make on what we're going to do moving forward. If this is a project that we're going to support, and I wanted to, with staff's help, lay out what the different options are, the pluses and minuses of this project. And you're correct. It is time to have that conversation, because it will require board action to let DOT know, is this a project that we want to support? Because we've been told they will provide the funding for right-of-way and construction. They will put that back into the work plan, the work program, but they won't do that until they know the will of this board. So kind of beat me to it, but yes, that was the intention, was to add it for discussion for the next set of meetings.
Very, very good. So if you'll get with staff and make sure that happens. All right, we'll now go to the Budget and Financial Management Committee. First item, I'm going to turn it over to you in a minute, Commissioner Williams. The first item is going to be a discussion of the Sea Turtle Conservation Center project. Number 9 on the Budget and Financial Management Committee is going to answer a lot of the questions, so I'll turn it over to Commissioner Rob Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Walker, we have a discussion item still remaining. You want to take that?
Please, as I had sent the board an email early Wednesday morning outlining, we've discussed this at great detail. We had talked about the 165 commitment that was done from District 4 recreation funds. The commitment was talked about. It was the subject of a letter. But when you went back to look specifically at the minutes and the motion of the meeting, the commitment was never formally made by the board. It was talked about, but the actual motion of the board did not include that. Staff was under the impression it had. The clerk did. We moved the budget amendments in there subsequently. So the confusion that I think was part of the problem. Now, the piece with the Turtle Center in their scheduling and all, I can't speak to, but as far as our difficulty was that we went out of sequence with how we should have handled that. But the Turtle Center wouldn't have known that. It's a good project. It was what we understood the will of the board to do. They've made reports to the board. Our recommendation is just to take, it was an error on our part from the Board of BoCC, other obligations. We would recommend that we would move the final amendment into that fund. I believe it's $7,888. It's later in the agenda. From that clears off the Turtle Center. We'll make immediately. The finance department will make the journal entries. There'd be no more way that we would access any of the remaining funds on that. So at the end of the year, they will revert back to their location. So the project is a good one. It wasn't particularly handled well. It was a confusing project. As you know, it had the 3 grants. We struggled with kind of the project management piece of it and how to do something. It's seldom that we pay somebody else's invoice on a long, complex project. And so, as we have noted, we're going to go back and we're going to make sure between finance, clerk finance, our department, that we get the proper, we make sure we've got our internal controls done on that to where that particular piece of it doesn't happen again. And then when in the event that we are ever confronted with having to do a project of this description, then we would end up doing making sure there was a clear scope of services, clear responsibilities, and that type of thing. The work done at the center has been, I think, has been fine. all the money that we sorted out in the spreadsheets, all of it went to the center. They went to improvements on the ground. So our recommendation would be to process this budget amendment. It closes that out. That will remain, I believe there'll still be a remainder of about $9,712 with the TDC funds. That'll, of course, continue to be overseen by the TDC director, working with the Turtle Center and the Marine Sanctuary, because that was kind of a joint project on promotion. The one thing that we are going to hold on, as I had mentioned again in the email in Monday, was the vet tech or the trainer. We need to get a better idea on how that would relate to TDC funds. The attorney has some concern that that's not necessarily a promotion. We got to get more information and figure that out a little better. So we would ask them to continue to hold on that piece of it, and Ms. Morgan will take care of that. But that's our recommendation. It seems to be a fair way of doing it.
Thank you, Mr. Walker, and thank you, Jane. Thank you to the Turtle Center that's here today. The questions that I asked have been answered, and we now know what the totals are in each of the different funding sources. And I'm fine with the budget amendment as put forward. We can either move to item number 9 and tackle that now, and then we can go back to the remainder. But I did want to provide any opportunity for the public to speak on this matter before we approve the budget amendment. And then if there's any members of the board that feel the need to comment any more on this, if not, then I'm prepared to go ahead and authorize the budget amendment, which would release the 7488 remaining funds. The 43,915, the TDC funds, that's pretty clear what's remaining in each one of those accounts. So that's already been set forth what that money can be used for in the grant application. So that's pretty straightforward. Chairman Salter.
Commissioner, if you don't mind, let's go ahead and read number 9, and so we can put this thing to bed.
I think that's a fabulous idea. Budget Amendment 2015-181 in the amount of $7,488 from General Fund Reserve for contingencies to other BoCC obligations to close out the Navarre Beach Sea Turtle Conservation Center commitment of $165,000. I'd move approval of this item without objection.
Hearing none, it passes.
Thank you. Go to item number 7, Budget Amendment 2015-179 in the amount of $7,659 to reverse Budget Amendment 2015-161. These funds were erroneously carried forward to complete the $60,000 grant allocated to the Navarre Beach Sea Turtle Conservation Center from the Tourist Development Fund. There were no remaining funds to be carried forward. I'd move approval of this item without objection.
Hearing none, it passes.
And